my name is Melissa Hughes, and I wrote a book called Happy Hour with Einstein, and the purpose of Happy Hour with Einstein was because I'm a geek, and I know that most people don't like to read multiple regression studies the way I do, and I get that, but 99% of us want to know what that study means in the way we work and the way we relate to other people and what we do. And so most people want to know how the brain works and how to make it work better. So I wrote that one, and it was kind of very shallow, I'll say. It was kind of a very casual conversation about neuroscience. And the feedback I got was, more, not enough, not enough. So I wrote Happier Hour with Einstein. Obviously, it would be happier, another round. And really found my way to this space in hospitality is just a very cool place for me to play. And part of that is because what you all do every day is all about perception. It's all about the perception of your people. It's all about the perception of your guests and creating that experience that makes them not just want to come back, but want to talk about it to someone else. So a while back, I was speaking at an event, and when I went to the hotel to check in, as many times the event coordinator will make my hotel reservations and just give me the confirmation number. So I went to check in, and the young lady at the desk said, "I am so happy to tell you that we have upgraded you to this fantastic room." And I was like, sweet, like that doesn't happen often, and that felt really good. So I get to the room, and I was like, wow, this is an amazing room, and look, there's a present. My first thought was, wow, what's in the box? And my second question was, who in the hell is Jordan, and where is he sleeping tonight? Because I didn't bring Jordan with me. So, when you get to your hotel, you unpack, we all have that routine, right? You take out your toiletries, you line them up in the bathroom, you hang your clothes, you figure out what, you wish for the wrinkle fairy to bless you in the middle of the night so you don't have to iron your clothes, whatever you do. And I was like, I'm going to call down to the front desk because I think that there's something wrong here. So I called down, and the same young lady who checked me in answered the phone, and she was like, "Oh, Miss Hughes, I don't know what's going on, but I will find out. I will find out for you." So I hang up the phone, and I think, you know what? I'm not going to unpack because it would be my luck. I would get everything out and unpacked and lined up just the way I want it, and then I'll have to, they would come and say, "You're in the wrong room. You need to change." So I thought, I'm going to go down and have a glass of wine. So I went down to the bar, stopped at the front desk, said, "Hey, when you figure that out, I'll be over here with a glass of wine. Come get me." So she did. She said, "It's all worked out. You're in the right room. So sorry for the inconvenience." And when I went back up to the room, Jordan's gift was gone, and in its place was a bottle of wine, the same kind of wine that I was drinking at the bar. I share this story because, I could have remembered this event because of all the confusion there, right? What I remember the most about that whole thing, besides, who's Jordan? What I remember the most is that this 20-something receptionist took the time to figure out what I was drinking and put that bottle of wine in my room, right? It wasn't the wine. It was the point that she made to say, with a note that said, "Sorry for the confusion. Hope you enjoy your stay." Hospitality is about the experience, but it's all about how we feel about that experience, right? So I can't start telling you anything until I give you a little neuroscience 101. So 95% of our cognitive processes happen in our subconscious. What we now know is the deeper the thought lives in the brain, the deeper the behavior lives in our subconscious. So what does that mean? That means that we do things and we have no idea why. It means we like things and we have no idea why. It means we don't like things and we really don't know why. But our neural development follows, our neural priorities follow neural development. So the brain develops from bottom to top and back to front. So the bottom part of the brain is the survival brain. The middle section of our brain is the limbic system. That's where our emotions live. That's where, the brain decides, am I okay or am I like running for the hills? And then the last part of the brain to develop is right behind your forehead. This is your prefrontal cortex. That's where all your higher level executive function happens. That's where you weigh risk and reward. That's where your impulse control lives. It isn't fully developed until our mid-20s. And it's not a coincidence that rental car companies charge you more if you're under 25 to rent a car. Because that part of the brain that is so engaged when we do something like drive a car isn't done developing yet. So the brain's priorities follow that development. The first priority, we'd like to think our first priority is to be brilliant and creative and charming. And the brain's first priority is to keep you alive. First thing, keep you alive. Second thing is to feel or to emote. And third in the list of things the brain has to do is think. So it comes behind everything else, right? So the intellectual brain is the part that says, what can I learn? But before the intellectual brain can be engaged, first it's, am I loved? And before that is, am I safe, right? So if your people don't feel like they're safe, and when I say safe, I don't just mean physically safe, because the brain really doesn't do a very good job of differentiating between physical safety and psychological safety. But if they're not safe in either one of those terms, then they're not going to be using their intellectual brain. It's physically impossible. The brain just doesn't work like that. The emotional center, or the limbic system that sits in the center of the brain, is responsible for figuring out how you're feeling and then releasing the neurotransmitters appropriately. So what's the stress hormone? Everybody knows the stress hormone. Cortisol, right? Actually, norepinephrine and adrenaline, those are the three stress hormones, and they kind of all work together when we especially when we have like a hair on fire day. Like, you guys don't have those, I know, you'd never have those. But when other people have a hair on fire day, it's norepinephrine, cortisol, and adrenaline. The good hormones are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And you can impress your friends tonight at dinner by remembering those with the word dose. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And just very quickly, dopamine is the I did it. It's also what motivates us to do something that we like. It's the reward and pleasure chemical. An overproduction of dopamine leads to addiction. An underproduction of dopamine leads to depression. But we're going to talk a little bit more about dopamine is the primary transmitter when we are experiencing pleasure. Oxytocin is the cuddle drug. It's the love drug. It's what the brain produces oxytocin when we have sex, when we hug, when we just feel like we're part of a group or part of a tribe. But the biggest surge of oxytocin is produced between a mother and her newborn child when she breastfeeds. And the reason for that is because the brain actually has dedicated pathways for oxytocin. Why? Because we're wired to connect. We can't do this thing called life all by ourselves. We're not good at it. We suck at it, actually. The last 3 years, right? Serotonin is the chill pill. It's everything is right with the world. I feel good. It's kind of that I'm okay, you're okay. We get serotonin from the sun, but we also get serotonin when someone recognizes us, right? When somebody says, hey, you did an amazing job last shift. I saw that. Like, you were really helping everyone. Thank you for being such a team player. That's that significance, that feeling that you matter, That's serotonin. And then endorphins. And endorphins, they're like our natural morphine or a natural painkiller. Any runners in the room? So endorphins, when you get that runner's high, that's endorphins kicking in. Okay? So if you learn nothing else today, you have learned dose, which is just dope, right? Okay. The other thing I want you to know about those chemicals is that they kind of operate on the neurological seesaw. So, when you're really stressed out and somebody comes up to you and says, you just need to relax, like just chill out, like really, you should not be so stressed. I mean, that works. Never, right? But what I have come to learn is that, if you think of those chemicals on the neurological seesaw, instead of saying reduce your cortisol levels, what's better to say is increase your other levels. Because when cortisol is high, that means all of your good chemicals that stimulate activity in the prefrontal cortex that keep your thinking brain activated, all those chemicals are low. So if you want to decrease cortisol, what's a better way to decrease cortisol? Increase those other chemicals, right? Go find your tribe. Go out in the sunshine. Get some dopamine. What's the best way to get dopamine? Set a goal and reach it, even if it's a tiny little goal. You want your people, your teams to have an increase in dopamine? Give them a challenge, one they can get, one they can achieve, right? A reachable challenge, and let them go out and do that challenge. And then when they do that challenge, they're all going to generate dopamine, which is going to make their thinking brain work better. So if you see like your whole place is all stressed out, instead of saying, how do I decrease cortisol, you say, how do I increase all of those other good chemicals? So all of this that's happening in your brain with the neurotransmitters and all the chemicals and when we feel stressed and when we feel okay, is what those chemicals actually influence the way we perceive things around us. So those chemicals is what makes us see, if we walk into that cafeteria, the same meal in that cafeteria is going to taste different if we have that same meal in that beautiful oceanfront candlelit environment. I think it's ocean. But it's not because the meal is different. It's because everything that's happening around us is creating a different neurochemical situation in our brain. And we feel differently about that sterile cafeteria environment than we do in that romantic, lovely, you can just feel the breeze, right, in that picture. It's also why, food tastes different on different shaped plates. Food tastes different on different colored plates, right? We have a different perception of the way food tastes based on the weight of the menu. We have a different perception of the way the food tastes based on the cutlery and the glassware and the tablecloth even. It's why if you tell people that the wait for their table is going to be 30 minutes and you seat them in 20, that food tastes better than if you tell them it's going to be a 20-minute wait and you seat them in 30. That food tastes worse. Same food, but it's the way the brain is processing that experience, and it's not just the way we experience it, but it's those chemicals actually jack with us. They do. And it's why, the lady with the smile who's welcoming you at the front desk, in less than 60 seconds, there's this thing called mirror neurons. And those mirror neurons, it's actually her smile creates a positive state in my brain. Conversely, that guy's frustration creates a negative state in my brain. So if I walk into your restaurant or your hotel and I see, grouchy guy, it doesn't have anything to do with your restaurant or your hotel. My experience is already shaded with negativity because of what's going on in my brain. So if there's one thing that your people should know how to do, and by the way, the brain can tell if it's a sincere smile and an insincere smile. Like the brain's really good at that. Okay. The other thing is, we're talking about all of our senses. So what we know is that the brain tastes food long before the tongue. The strongest sense is vision. So we know that, right? Presentation is everything. We know that. But it's not just the presentation of the food on the plate. It's me seeing, the hostess or the host at, at the hostess stand. Are there boxes by the hostess stand? I mean, is the person, is the Coke sitting on the hostess stand? I might not be able to tell you why that just wasn't a great experience, but every single one of those things that I see is a puzzle piece, right? That my brain is stitching together and creating a perception. Taste is actually the weakest sense of all five. So, how many restaurant folks here? Okay, so for all the restaurant folks and the hotel folks too, right? Before those people sit down and taste whatever it is, that amazing dish that's on that plate, they hear the noise in the restaurant, they hear the music, they hear the baby crying over there, they hear the tray of glasses that just went crash over there. They see how clean the place is. Have you ever walked into a restaurant in the middle of the day and it's like so dark it takes you like a minute to like figure out where you are? Or you come in the evening time and the place is so bright. So there's a cognitive dissonance there. Like your brain is like, something's off here, but I can't figure it out. Like you may not actually articulate how that impacts your experience, but believe that it does. So taste is your weakest sense, vision is your strongest sense, but all of those senses work together to create that experience. So why do we like what we like? Well, we like what we like because of anticipation and novelty. So Robert, my old friend, Robert Irvine, was talking about expectations and anticipation, and right, we anticipate what that meal is going to taste like. We anticipate what that weekend at that resort is going to be like. You anticipate what you're, coming here, what my room is going to be like. We also favor simplicity and familiarity. We're going to talk about that, and connection and stories. So to understand how all of those fit together, you have to understand primary human drivers. Everything we do is driven by three basic things. First one, what's the brain's first priority? Survive. The first one is it going to keep me alive? I mean, that's why we eat, right? We do things to survive that we don't even think about. Like if we cannot digest food, we will die. Do you ever think about, I hope my body's digesting food really well right now? Like we don't think about that. But if we can't do it, we will die. The other one is to avoid pain. So first is to survive, second is to avoid pain, and third is to seek pleasure. We're pretty simple. That's who we are. Survive, avoid pain, seek pleasure. If we are avoiding pain or uncomfortable or experiencing physical pain, social rejection, by the way, the brain cannot tell the difference between social rejection and physical pain. So if you are rejected by a teammate or a boss, a manager, the brain processes it the same way it does a punch in the face. Not kidding, right? Grief and sadness engages our pain network, but also unfair treatment. Well, that server didn't tell me this was going to have gravy all over it. Pain network. Am I in pain? No, but the brain processes unfair treatment as pain. If I think I've been ripped off, if I think something costs more than it should, If I think someone took advantage of me, pain network. Flip side is the reward network. And this engages when we experience pleasure, belonging, acceptance. When we pull together as a team and we reach some great goal and we get rewarded for that. Pleasure network. Gratitude, appreciation. When the boss comes up and says, you did an amazing job today. Pleasure network. Fair treatment. Pleasure. So, all of these things that we do throughout the day, one of those networks is engaged. So think about your folks. Which network is engaged more? Because I can tell you that if their pain network is engaged more, what hormones are coursing through their brains? Cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline, right? And when the stress hormones are flowing, the thinking brain is not in charge. As a matter of fact, when the stress hormones are flowing at a peak or even chronic, then what happens is the brain shuts down the activity in the prefrontal cortex to allocate more neural resources to deal with the threat. Why? Because its first job is to keep us alive. Right? Okay. So let's talk about these. Anticipation and novelty, simplicity and familiarity, and stories and connection. So anticipation is, when you think about the customer journey, whether it is in the hotel or in the restaurant, the customer journey starts long before they come into your place. It's reviews online, they look at your website, or their neighbor says, hey, I went to this great new restaurant, or, here's this fantastic hotel we stayed at, and we had this amazing time. When you're looking at a menu, right, so a lot of things happen in that customer journey before you sit down and look at this menu. But when you look at this menu, words are powerful. So when you look at the metaphor effect, says there's language, different words that activate the right side of the brain. What's the right side of the brain in charge of? Emotional expression, creativity, that's our touchy-feely side, right? Is that the part of the brain that you want to engage in your guests? Oh yeah. Because the flip side is their left side of the brain is engaged, and that's the analytical side. That's the part that's asking for an itemized bill, right? And deciding whether it was really worth it. Sensory words, like we can paint a picture for people very strongly using words. Ingredients, so I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about story, but people are really kind of interested in what kind of ingredients you're using in your dishes. They want to know. Is it organic? Is it local? They want to know these things. So servers need to be very well versed in what your ingredients are. There's a study done about rewards. So remember, I said dopamine is I did it. Dopamine is the reward and pleasure chemical. So there's a guy named Robert Sapolsky, and he wanted to know, well, exactly how does dopamine work when we get rewarded? So what he did was he created this experiment where rats had to press a button a certain number of times, and once they pressed the button a certain number of times, they would get a treat. And he did that, and he said, where do you think we get the most dopamine in that situation? Do you think it's when they're signaled that they can actually press the button, when they're doing the work, or when they get the reward? So most people think, well, when you get the reward, that's when you get the dopamine boost. But Sapolsky found something very different. He said, no, when the signal happens and the rat says, oh, I can go press that button now, and after a certain number of presses, I will get the reward. The peak of the dopamine comes before the reward. What does that say? Anticipation is the biggest part of the reward. Like, use that to your advantage with your customers. Like play on that anticipation. So then he said, you know what? What if they don't always get that amazing reward? Like, what if they don't always get that room upgrade? Guess what happens? Dopamine doubled. Dopamine doubled. When there's a 50-50 chance of them getting that amazing reward, they get twice as much dopamine. Incidentally, that works the opposite way. If there's a 50-50 chance something bad is going to happen, that's when stress is at its peak. That's when cortisol spikes. It's like if you think about if you have a 2 o'clock meeting and you're in the car and there's some traffic jam and you're looking at your GPS, and you see the GPS getting closer and closer and closer to 2 o'clock. And you know that, like, if you could jetson yourself, like the Jetsons mobile, like right out of the traffic and zoom to the meeting, like right then you could make it at 2 o'clock. But that's not likely to happen. So what happens is your stress and anxiety goes higher and higher and higher until you get to the point where you go, I'm never going to make it. Then your stress decreases. Because then, guess what happens? When your stress decreases, that's when your thinking brain kicks in and says, okay, I need a text. I need a call. I need to let them know I'm going to be late, right? If you think about like really bad things that happen in our lives. So there was a study done with women who had biopsies for breast cancer. When do you think their stress was the highest? Before they got diagnosed or after? Always before. Even if they were diagnosed with cancer. And then look what happens next. Then he said, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to give them the reward 25% of the time or 75% of the time. That kind of fell in the middle. So I'm not saying only please your customers half of the time. That's not what I'm saying. But there is something very special about, kind of that surprise element. And if you can, that's why surprise and delight works so well in marketing initiatives, right? Simplicity and familiarity. The reason that the brain loves simplicity is because neural pathways are created over time. So, if you think about every time you learn how to do something, I want you to think about it's like walking through this field for the first time. So think about the first time you learn how to tie your shoes. And whatever the little song is or the steps, loop, loop, wrap, pull, whatever they are, right? The first time you do it, it's like walking through the field for the first time. There's no path. You're paying attention. You're careful. You're looking around at your surroundings. But you walk that path every day for a month. Now it looks like that. Do you have to pay attention anymore? Nope. You just kind of follow the path. That's how neural pathways work in the brain. So the more you do something, the bigger and stronger that neural pathway gets. And guess what? The brain's really lazy and fickle. And if it can take the easiest path, it's going to. So it requires intention to say, I'm going to build a new pathway today. I'm going to do something different. And for those of us who are like thirsty to learn something new all the time, then that's what we're doing. But it requires intention because left on its own devices, the brain would go, nah, that pathway's okay. I'll just do it that way, right? But also think about simplicity. The simplicity theory says that the brain is going to gravitate to the simplest way possible. And if it's going to require too much of my brain power to get through that experience, yeah, you know what, I'll do that later. Like, I'm just going to pass on that. Netflix has figured that out. Netflix, you don't even have to pick up the remote anymore. Like, it has figured out, like, you want to binge watch Animal Kingdom, you just start the season, and like, you could wake up 2 days later and it'll be on season 4, right? You don't have to do anything. And Netflix says, oh, you liked Animal Kingdom? You might like this. You might like, here are some other things that you might like, which is why I like to blame Netflix for every weekend that I get nothing done. So there are studies, they've looked at studies and they've actually asked people, like, is the simplicity of the experience, what that means is, was it hard to create a reservation? Was it hard to check in? Was it hard, for some people, was it hard to read the menu? Like, have you ever gone somewhere and there's like a 72-page menu and you just go, where do I even start? Because there's something else called decision fatigue and paradox of choice, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But 64% of consumers are much more likely to recommend a brand because the experience was simple. God, it was so easy. Yeah, we got there. I mean, we were like in the room in no time. It was like a piece of cake. Since 2009, the simplest brands, those brands that have been known for their simple experiences, have outperformed in the stock market. 55% of consumers are willing to pay more for a simpler experience. So the bottom line is, make sure that guest experience is as simple as possible. Your guests will like it more, even if they don't know why. Even if they don't know why. And it's kind of counterintuitive because we think that the more attention to detail, the more stuff, the better we're going to like it. Sometimes less is more. And then finally, connection and stories. So I had something else here, and then today at lunchtime I actually changed this out to include John Wayne Gold Handle Coffee. Did anyone here have John Wayne Gold Handle Coffee today? That was our coffee today here at the event. So I did not know this, and we're having a conversation with this guy, and what's his name? Paul Heileman, and he says, I said, what do you do? And he says, I'm a partner at John Wayne Gold Handle Coffee. And I said, tell me about that. He said, yeah, so John Wayne family, and for 25 years, John Wayne would give every cast member at the end of a movie a gold-handled, personalized coffee mug. And he said, is John in here? Paul in here today? Paul, am I doing it justice? Okay, good. Do you want to tell the story? Okay, good. Right? Cool story, right? We love stories like that. So now I know you guys are all going to be Googling the gold handle coffee mug because I already did. Thank you, Paul. But it's a good story. And when we hear stories like that, like we remember them. And there's this sense of nostalgia too. I mean, when you think about John Wayne, like, and somebody out there has this mug that was like, to Paul, like here, I mean, that's a very cool thing. There was another study done where they actually brought these dishes in and they asked people, they ranked it on taste, presentation, several different factors. But the first group, they actually put on a placard, on a card on the table of all of the ingredients. And it was, saffron risotto with licorice made with, and had all of the details of the highest quality ingredients. And then the second card said saffron risotto with licorice. Which dish do you think the people preferred? I didn't tell you all of the information, so I tricked you a little bit. So, in the first one, none of the staff members told them anything about the dish. They let the card speak for itself. In the second group, the chef came out to the table and said, "This is my grandmother's recipe, saffron risotto with licorice." I remember as a little boy sitting down and watching Grandma make this dish, and tells the story. There's the nostalgia. There's the story. Guess which dish was preferred? 77% preferred that dish. And guess what? That dish was made with inferior ingredients. It's the story. It's the brain is amazing and sometimes dumb, like really dumb, right? We don't like to think we're brilliant. Sometimes not so much.
Thank you for buying me that bag the other day.
Come on. It's more for me than you.
God, you have beautiful eyes.
Everyone tells me that.
I'm the only one that told you that.
No, I don't mean like in a flirty way. But people, when I was a kid, like, you got great eyes. It's like, I'm just a guy.
You're my guy.
I am your guy.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hi, hello.
My name is Dana. I'll be taking care of you today. If you have any questions about the menu, please let me know.
I guess I do have a question about the chicken. If you could just tell us a little bit more about it.
The chicken is a heritage breed, woodland-raised chicken that's been fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy, and hazelnuts.
Okay, this is local?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you just one more time, and it's local.
It is.
Is that USDA organic or Oregon organic or Portland organic?
It's just all across the board, organic.
The hazelnuts, these are local?
How big is the area where the chickens are able to roam free?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I had exactly the same question.
4 acres. Give me just a second. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
She's nice.
Well, you're doing the right thing.
I'm too apologetic.
You are.
I drove way too slow here today, didn't I? I am so weird with that gas pedal. The thing just moves the whole vehicle forward.
All right, so here is the chicken you'll be enjoying tonight.
You have this information. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. His name was Colin. Here are his papers, okay?
That's great. He looks like a happy little guy who runs around. A lot of friends, other chickens as friends. Putting his little wing around another one and kind of like palling around.
I don't know that I can speak to that level of intimate knowledge about him. They do a lot to make sure that their chickens are very happy.
When you say they, I mean, who are these people raising Colin?
It's a farm that's located about 30 miles south of Portland.
And you feel, you have a good relationship with this farm?
We do.
But is that some guy on a yacht who lives in Miami?
Oh,
who's
goodness,
just
no.
saying that he's organic?
It tears at the core of my being, the idea of someone just cashing in on a trend like organic.
No, I know the type, no.
Yeah.
Tell you what, we're gonna go check it out if you don't mind. Just if you could hold our seats.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and we'll be right back. Just want to make sure.
Just, thank you so much, Dana.
Sure.
So you don't have any of those folks coming into your place, do you? Okay. I have to speed this up, so I'm going to go really fast. So we know that expectations influence how we perceive things, but what you might not know is our expectations actually change the chemistry of the brain. So there was a study done by a guy named Baba Shiv, and Baba Shiv said, I am going to track the dopamine, the part of the brain that is engaged in the reward pathway when people are drinking what they think is a $5 glass of wine compared to a $45 bottle of wine. And in this top one, this top line, that's the $45 bottle of wine. It is the same bottle of wine, exact same wine. But the brain activation was higher when they were drinking what they thought was a better bottle of wine. Look what happens when it's not just a $5 and a $45, it's a $10 and a $90. Huge spread, right? The brain is physically different when we think we're drinking a better glass of wine. So it's not just kind of psychology, it's actually neurology, which is cool as hell, right? So very quickly, rituals, so the brain is very quirky. We have rituals and we have biases, and both of those things can impact why we do what we do and why we perceive things to be amazing or not so much. So rituals, why do we put a lemon in a Corona? Does anybody know why? I don't know, because somebody did it once, right? If I serve you a Corona with an orange, you would be like, take this back. Where's my lemon, right? Yeah, go ahead. So there's also a theory that it was a bar bet. And one bartender said to another bartender, I bet I can start a thing and start putting lemons in these. So I think we need to get Corona here right now to answer that. Guinness created this whole thing about the slow pour, right? Good things come to those who wait. There's that anticipation again. So instead of making it an irritation and an annoyance, they said, oh, no. You're special. If you wait for that Guinness, it's going to be worth it. How about Kit Kat? Does anyone eat a Kit Kat like this? Anyone? No one eats a Kit Kat like this. What do? We break it apart, right? How about DoubleTree cookies? So a couple weeks ago, I went to the DoubleTree. It was a long travel day. I actually was one of the 2,000 flights that got disrupted that day, whatever it was. And by the time I got to the hotel, there was a guy in front of me, and he checked in, and he said, where's my cookie? And the guy was like, oh, yeah, we're out of cookies right now. We don't have any cookies. And the guy was visibly upset. Like, he was upset. And actually, I have to admit it, in the shuttle bus on the way to the hotel, I was like, you will not eat that cookie. You will not eat that cookie. You will not eat that cookie, right? So I had already psyched myself up not to eat the cookie. And then when the guy was like, where's my cookie? I was like, yeah, where's my cookie? I want my cookie too, right? But Hilton did an amazing thing in COVID, right? Nobody was going to the DoubleTree. Nobody was traveling. So what did Hilton do? They released the cookie recipe online. And now everybody's talking about the Hilton DoubleTree chocolate chip walnut cookie recipe, right? Brilliant. Did it take it away from anything? No, because everybody's still going to go get that cookie instead of making it yourself, right? But these are rituals that make us emotionally connected to the brand. Not only that, but it makes that brand memorable and familiar. And what do we know about things that are familiar? Remember the path in the field? The brain likes that. So there was another study. Oh, sorry. Let me do this one.
So where's Don?
I'm sure you remember Peggy Olson. She'll be walking you through this. And when Don climbs out from under the weather, Don has signed off on all of this.
When I was little, my mother would take a twin pop and break it in half and give one to me and one to my sister. We were completely equal in her eyes. Beloved. Everyone does this with popsicles, but they may not realize what it means. It has nothing to do with an ice cream truck on a hot summer day, or the flavor, or the color. It's a ritual. You take it, break it, share it, and love it.
People do that.
This act of sharing, it's what a popsicle is. It's the same treat from the freezer as it is from the truck. I don't care if it's snowing or hailing or 100 degrees. You can still take it, break it, share it, and love it.
I like the way she's handing out the pops. The kids are excited. But the mom reminds me of something.
No, this is original.
Well, I can tell you this now, but we wanted something with the word love in it. When asked, the first thing people say is, I love popsicles.
So rituals are powerful. Do you have rituals in your place? There was a study done and they looked at rituals and said rituals actually enhance consumption. Not only do we find things more flavorful because of the ritual, so the chocolate bar has more flavor when we break it a certain way. The lemonade is better when somebody's actively involved in making it rather than if we watch somebody make it. So the ritual can't be something that we watch. We have to be personally involved in that ritual. But we also have greater heightened enjoyment because of the anticipation. So rituals are huge. Biases, I'm going to do this and then I am out of time and you all have to come to my session tomorrow if you want to hear any more of this. But our rituals actually shape perceptions of experience. Our biases shape perceptions of experiences. And there are two I want to show you. The paradox of choice. We think more is better. More is not better. The brain does not like too many choices. There's a reason why car companies bundle options. So you don't have to pick every single option. I personally cannot stand shopping for cars, but that would make me run for the door. Like, I would just not want to do that. So they did a study with jams. It was a Harvard study, and they said, you know, there were 24 choices and 6 choices of gourmet jams. 60% of the shoppers stopped. 3% purchased jams. They had another setup. There was only 6 jams, only 6 choices, which you would think, oh gosh, there are 24 choices. That's way more. Surely we're going to find something that everyone will like. Not so much. Too many choices, people walked by. 6 choices, 40% of the shoppers stopped by, but 30% purchased, right? People do not like, it's the simplicity theory. Keep it simple. When we see too many choices, we see our brand and we see a whole bunch of blah, 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 blah. We see the brand we thought about 5-10 minutes ago, yesterday, last week. Everything else is just noise. Finally, peak end effect. Peak end effect says we remember the emotionally intense event and we remember the end, right? If the emotionally intense experience in the event is positive, then that's pretty much what we're going to remember. If the emotional experience is negative, then we're going to remember it as a negative experience. Imagine you go on a cruise. The cruise is amazing. You go to the Amalfi Coast. The views are wonderful. The water's so blue. You have oysters. One bad oyster. You're green, puking in your cabin like all day long. That entire trip is shaded by that negative perception. The whole rest of the trip was amazing. When you think of that trip, you think of the bad oysters. So, thank you very much. I am presenting tomorrow on the employee experience, more geekiness to come. So, sorry I went over.